Welcome anyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Michelle McCauley. I'm a Native American music educator, a consultant, a performer. And today I wanted to come on here and share this short video with you, and I want to tackle this concept. This is going to be the one, I'm probably going to do more videos on this, but this has to do with Native American music and songs that come from different tribes and music notation. So I get contacted quite a few times, like several times throughout the year, from individuals who say things like, what do you think about if I notate or if I score a powwow song or something to that sort for concert band, for orchestra, for choir? Or I just recently went to the ACDA convention at the beginning of 2022, and I was approached by a couple of individuals. They had a song and they said, hey, this is a Native American song. What kind of drum and rattle should I put in there? Or what should this pattern be? And I was like, wait, what? I was like, well, what tribe is it from? Because it was composed with music notation and everything. And there was really no response, and the woman just said that she wrote it. So a couple of things are going through my mind. As a composer myself, I've written a couple of songs in my own, I would say a cultural composer, similar to a culture bear, I guess, to write songs in the style of music of the circle dance, which is what my tribal nation is, what we do here. So when I compose a song in that regards, it's about our life ways, and at no point am I going to put that into musical notation, because I don't see the relationship between Western classical music notation and my culture. And besides, all the events where I'm going to be singing my songs during the hand drum contest, or I have a book coming out with the song, there's no music composition or that is needed. And classical music notation was created in Europe. Native American people, especially here in the United States, we have 576 federally recognized tribes, but there are more tribes that have their own songs, their own ways of singing. They usually have to deal with times of year, their own life ways, their own celebrations. And that to take those songs and put them into classical music European notation, I feel like there is absolutely no need. There has been some points that some music educators, I guess, have come to me, and I want to dispel that right away, because I've been thinking about this. These comments were made a couple of years in between each other, and just recently hearing it again, I was like, why are they thinking this? Why would you think this? So I'm going to break this down. So one of the comments is, why don't you write your Native American music down in Western music notation so that it can last for years and you can have something to pass on to your great grandchildren? So when I first heard this from music educators who are solely European notation music, readers, they don't really practice the cultural part, but they want everything in notation. I had to start to think about, in the beginning, it kind of sounds like, yeah, that would be a good idea. But then when I think about, how my cultural actually functions, I don't ever go to a cultural event, if they're doing hand game, if we're doing powwow, if we're doing some kind of conference and people are doing cultural exchanges, there's never any music stands, there's never any music notation. So the way that we are living currently right now in the United States, even despite the fact that the boarding schools tried to take our culture away, the way Native American people are existing with our songs right now is just like a culture bear do, orally. There's libraries and libraries of songs in our heads. We don't need the music notation. And then even breaking it down into something to orchestrate something for a band, or orchestrate something for a choir, or orchestrate something for an orchestra, you have to think about the dynamics. Okay, well, what was this song written for? It's written for a single voice, okay? And I would really highly recommend collaborating with live artists. There's also, when someone says you can save your culture by writing your Native American songs down in written musical notation, that's missing the other point, is that there's plenty of Native American people alive and making music They're putting it on YouTube. And these are songs that people can share. These are not the sacred songs that are not supposed to be shared. These are songs that are able to be shared and captured, you know, on videos, on Snapchats, on Instagram, on TikTok. That is where largely a lot of our composers currently are. That's where they are, and they can be found. So reach out to the composers and learn about the context of the song, of why do you want this put into European notation? I know for music education as a whole, it's basically classical music education. That's how you train teachers, so you want it that way, but that's not the function. Everyone says in music education, you want to create lifelong music learners. Well, cultures already have that built in. We have songs we're going to hear from the time we're born till the time, you know, we pass away. Those songs are always going to be relevant. And we can learn to appreciate them, or just listen, like kind of musicking, sitting on the side, knowing what it's for. We can be the performers. We could be the singers. We could be the dancers. There's a part of the culture that we fit into. So classical music, European notation is not here to save Native American people. We don't need it. And as someone who can write classical music compositions, I can read it. I love to read music. I love to be parts of bands. I love to play in orchestras. I love to read choral music. That is the function of our cultural music. We don't function with music. That is a classical music education forum. So I'm going to push back on anyone who tells me, you know, it would be a good idea. No, it's not a good idea. We don't need it, because our songs survived the boarding schools. Our songs survived almost mass, you know, our culture was almost stolen from us on purpose by the government. And the purpose of the schools was to save the Indian, kill the man, and civilize. So if civilizing means writing things down, I would actually ask you, the music educator, are you re-emphasizing this idea that Native American people or cultural music are not civilized because, again, their music isn't written down? That is an argument that was used to steal a lot of the native land here in the United States, which, you know, is being awarded back to tribes every day from broken treaties and things like that. So the other point I want to get to towards the end of this video is this idea that Native American music, saying that all Native American music is sacred. So we have non-Native people. We have people of color saying this. We have white music educators saying this. And the person that I heard it from was my old college professor, who was a woman of color. And she was saying that most Native American music is so sacred, we shouldn't be performing it at all. And nothing could be further from the truth. When a statement like that is made, specifically to myself, because I know different, because I know so many singers, we travel all over. I know there's no shortage of living composers of Native people who would be willing to work with educational institutions, or would be willing to teach kids songs that they compose themselves. I know that to be true on my side, and hearing it from a person of color especially, which is, I think in the last couple of years is where I've heard this statement come from, was a person of color. It wasn't necessarily a white person, but saying that our music is so hard to come by, it just shows a lack of connection. It shows no relationship to that community. And right now I know in music education in all areas, choral, orchestral, band, in all the areas that traditionally are associated with music education, they're trying to do better. They want to include and be more diverse. But also what comes with that is you need to also make connections with existing communities and understanding their musical traditions, their musical protocol, and being able to go in there. Even if you have a master's, even if you have a PhD, even if you're the head of a national organization, you need to humble yourself and understand that every single culture that you come in contact with has a musical tradition. And you need to sit back and not apply European musical classical standards or just your own training to something that is completely different. And this is something that I have learned to do from such a young age. Is anytime I meet another culture, I sit back and just listen to what they have to offer. And because I've operated that way, it's so easy for me to do that. But as of late, there has been, just because a person of color says it and they're not Native American, it also shows that person of color, that educator of color, or BIPOC, because we can even have Indigenous people who are disconnected from their community still go along with internalized inferiority statements such as that. So Native American music, very much so, does belong to other people, and there are composers like myself. I would be willing to come and conduct your choral or honors choir, something like that, work with the school as a guest collaborator conductor. That is the number one way that I believe we can start making more positive connections for Native American music, and to be able to understand it and to not think of it as inferior, and also to not appropriate it. If a composition is written out in Western classical music notation and the composer was not Native American, because we do have a couple of classical music composers who are Native American, who do come from tribes. They're very few, but I've come across mostly choral, some choral and orchestral writings that were by non-Native people, and they were basically had every single stereotypical drum pattern that Hollywood put out with the Westerns, and that is appropriating. So make those connections, and if you're unwilling to make those connections, then just don't label anything Native American. But we're here, we're willing to work with you, and music notation is not classical music. European classical music notation is not the savior to Native American tribes or any indigenous tribes. Our culture lasted long before contact. We've had songs long before any contact. Our songs are still intact today, and they're still going to continue on without European classical music notation. So I hope this kind of opened up your minds. If you were able to listen to the very end of the video, you are on your way to becoming a more culturally responsible educator. And thank you for taking the time to listen to the entire video. We always go for mastery of any subject, and learning more always includes hours of study, hours of time dedicated, even if it's just 1 or 2 hours out of the day. So thank you so much. Sa'a'opanidawa, which means I'll see you later. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Feel free to contact me through my email here at michelle.mccauley@gmail.com. I do have a website, therealmichelle.com, if you'd like to check that out. It is a little under construction, and at this current time I am taking offers to come and conduct choirs and bands, so feel free to reach out to me that way. All right, sa'o panitwa.